The first thing I noticed when I walked through the hospital doors that morning wasn't the usual hum of monitors or the chatter of the shift change. It was the smell. Hospitals always carried their own cocktail of scents: antiseptic, latex gloves, faint hints of coffee from the staff lounge. But that morning there was something off. A sharpness in the air, almost metallic, that prickled the back of my nose. I shook it off as nerves. I'd been working 3 12-hour shifts in a row, and exhaustion had a way of making everything feel unusual. Still, as I signed in at the nurse's station and clipped my badge to my scrubs, I felt a faint unease ripple through me. My first assignment was in the surgical wing, prepping pre-op patients and assisting with rounds. Dr. Nathaniel Price was leading surgeries that day, and he was already in the unit, his white coat swishing behind him as he crossed from one room to another. Normally, I admired his precision. He was the kind of surgeon who barely spoke during rounds, but radiated competence. Today, though, there was something different in the way he moved. His steps weren't steady. They dragged slightly, then jerked forward like he was forcing his body to keep pace. His posture sagged, his head tilting just a fraction too low for his usual confidence. I paused with a chart in hand, watching him walk down the hall, my gut tightening. "Morning," I said when he turned toward me. He gave me a smile, but it was off, too wide, too delayed. His eyes, normally sharp and calculating, looked glassy. "Morning," he mumbled, voice thick. He gave me a smile, but it was off, too wide, too delayed. His eyes, normally sharp and calculating, looked glassy. "Morning, nurse," he mumbled, voice thick. I froze. My first thought was alcohol. I'd seen patients stumble into the ER drunk plenty of times, but I'd never thought I'd see a surgeon on the verge of leading an operation looking like this. I studied his face, the slight flush in his cheeks, the faint smell that seemed to follow him. Bitter, not quite alcohol, but close enough that my mind leapt there. "You all right, doctor?" I asked carefully, keeping my voice even. "Fine," he said, brushing past me. "Just tired." But I knew exhaustion when I saw it. Nurses lived on exhaustion. This was something else. As the morning wore on, the signs piled up. In pre-op, he double-checked the same chart twice, flipping the pages as if the words wouldn't stick. He knocked over a tray of instruments and laughed it off instead of snapping at the orderly, which was unlike him. His hands, usually steady as stone, trembled when he signed consent forms. Each time I caught myself clenching my jaw, pulse hammering in my throat. If he was drunk or hungover, that was dangerous enough. But if he was under the influence of something else, the thought made my stomach churn. During a lull, I slipped into the lounge, hoping to clear my head. My fellow nurse, Carla, was stirring sugar into her coffee. "You look tense," she said, eyeing me. I hesitated. Should I say something? Should I tell her what I was noticing? Instead, I forced a smile. "Just a long morning already." Carla shrugged. "Tell me about it." "Coffee?" I shook my head. Coffee wouldn't settle me, not when the image of Dr. Price's glassy eyes kept flashing in my mind. By mid-morning, the tension was unbearable. I had to know for sure. When Dr. Price slipped out of the surgical wing between cases, muttering something about needing to grab supplies, I followed at a distance. My heart pounded as I trailed him down the hall, past the storage rooms and toward the back corridors rarely used except by staff. He moved quickly, his shoulders hunched, his head darting as if checking to see if anyone was watching. That alone made my stomach twist. If he were simply grabbing equipment, why would he look so guilty? I slowed my pace, careful to keep several feet between us, and watched as he ducked into a small closet near the end of the hall. The supply closet. I knew it well, barely large enough for shelves and a mop bucket. The door clicked shut. I pressed myself against the wall, breathing shallowly. If he was sneaking alcohol, This was my chance to confirm it. The thought alone horrified me, but at least it was something I could report, something tangible. I crept closer, my shoes squeaking faintly against the tile. My palms were slick, my throat dry. I reached the door and paused, listening. For a moment, there was silence. Then, faintly, the sound of glass clinking. A bottle? My chest tightened, but then I heard something else. The sharp hiss of air being pulled through a syringe. My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear. A faint groan, almost relief followed by the shuffle of movement. My mind raced, replaying everything I'd seen. His glassy eyes, his trembling hands, his uneven gait. This wasn't alcohol. This was worse. Much worse. I pushed the door open a crack, heart slamming against my ribs. The dim light inside revealed Dr. Price hunched on a stool, his shoe discarded, his foot propped on a shelf. And there, between the webbing of his toes, was the glint of a needle, plunged deep. I gasped before I could stop myself. His head jerked up, eyes wide. For a split second, time froze. Me standing in the doorway, him caught in the act, the needle still in his foot. Then he snarled, yanking the syringe out and shoving it into his pocket. "Get out!" he hissed. I staggered back, hand over my mouth. My mind screamed at me to run, to report this, to do something. But my body was frozen. He stood, pulling his shoe back on with frantic movements, his face twisted into a mask of anger and fear. "You didn't see anything," he spat, stepping closer. But I had, and I couldn't unsee it. For a long, suspended moment, I stood frozen in the supply closet doorway, staring at Dr. Price as though I no longer recognized the man. His reputation as a skilled surgeon, as the man families trusted with their loved ones, dissolved before my eyes. All I could see was the syringe, the puncture wound he'd tried to hide in the vulnerable webbing of his toes. He shoved past me, his shoulder colliding with mine. "I said you didn't see anything," he growled, voice low but urgent. His breath carried a sour tang of adrenaline and something chemical I couldn't place. "If you know what's good for you, you'll keep your mouth shut." I stumbled back, pressing against the cold hallway wall as he stormed away, his footsteps uneven but determined. My hands shook, palms clammy, as if I'd just walked into a nightmare. What the hell did I just witness? I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I had a choice, and either path was terrifying. If I stayed silent, patients' lives could be on the line. If I spoke up, my own career could be destroyed. I'd be branded the whistleblower, the nurse who ruined a surgeon's life. The memory of him in that closet replayed in my mind like a broken film reel. The glint of the needle, the way his jaw clenched as the drug hit his bloodstream, the desperation in his eyes when he realized I'd caught him. I forced myself to move, to get back to the surgical wing before someone noticed I'd been gone. Each step felt like dragging a boulder. When I reached the unit, I slipped behind the nurse's station, grabbed a chart, and pretended to study it while my thoughts spun wildly. Carla looked up from her notes. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry, but I forced a nod. "Just tired," I muttered. The lie tasted bitter. Minutes stretched into hours, though the clock barely moved. I checked vitals, prepped patients, but everything felt distant, muffled. Every time I glanced toward Dr. Price, I saw him differently now. Not as a surgeon, but as a man teetering on the edge of control. And then came the moment that made my blood run cold. "Dr. Price," the OR coordinator called. "Your patient for the cardiac bypass is ready. We'll move them in 15 minutes. 15 minutes until a man with a fresh injection of God knows what in his system would hold a beating heart in his hands." I gripped the chart tighter, knuckles white. My mind screamed at me to do something, but fear tangled every thought. If I reported him, would anyone believe me? Or would they side with the brilliant surgeon over the exhausted nurse? What if they thought I had a grudge, that I was lying? But what if I did nothing, and the patient never woke up from that surgery? I slipped into the staff bathroom, locking the door behind me. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, haunted. I pressed my palms to the sink, forcing myself to breathe. You're a nurse. Your duty is to the patients. Always the patients. But the thought of walking into administration's office, of saying the words I saw Dr. Price injecting drugs into his foot, made my stomach twist violently. He would deny it. He would call me a liar. He would ruin me. The knock on the door startled me so badly I jumped. "You in there?" It was Carla's voice. "Yeah," I said quickly, splashing water on my face. "Be right out." When I emerged, the hallway buzzed with movement. The surgical team was already gathering. Dr. Price stood among them, his mask dangling from one ear, his gloved hands flexing. To anyone else, he looked composed, ready, but I saw the faint tremor in his fingers, the sheen of sweat on his forehead. The patient, a man in his 60s with thinning gray hair, was being wheeled past on a gurney, his family trailing behind with worried eyes. The wife clutched her husband's hand, whispering prayers under her breath. The daughter's face was pale, tear-streaked. My chest tightened painfully. They're trusting him. They're trusting us. I couldn't let it happen. I moved quickly, almost on instinct, before fear could stop me. I crossed the hall, bypassed the OR, and went straight to Janet, the nurse manager, who was reviewing schedules at her desk. She looked up as I approached. "Something wrong?" The words caught in my throat, but I forced them out. "Yes, I need to report something about Dr. Price." Her eyebrows rose, her expression sharpening. "Go on." My pulse thundered in my ears. "He's impaired. I saw him injecting something in the supply closet, between his toes. He's about to lead a cardiac bypass." The silence that followed was suffocating. Janet studied me, her eyes narrowing as if weighing every word, every twitch in my expression. "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked finally, her voice low. "Yes," I whispered, my throat tight. "I saw it with my own eyes." She didn't waste another second. She picked up the phone, dialing a direct line with clipped precision. "Security to OR3. Now my legs nearly gave out. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Security officers arrived, their radios crackling. Administrators appeared, their faces drawn tight with concern. The surgical team froze mid-prep, watching with wide eyes as Dr. Price was intercepted at the doorway. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, his mask slipping from his ear. "I'm about to operate." "You need to come with us," one of the officers said firmly. "You can't be serious." He turned, his gaze locking on me. Fury blazed in his eyes, raw and unmasked. "You!" The hours after Dr. Price was taken away felt like walking through the wreckage of a storm. Whispers trailed me down every corridor, staff glancing at me as though I carried a secret too heavy for one person. Word spread quickly. The star surgeon had been arrested for drug use on hospital grounds. Janet called me into her office not long after. She closed the door gently and fixed me with a steady look. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice firm but softer than usual. "I know it wasn't easy, but you may have saved a life today." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Right or not, I felt exposed. Dr. Price's glare still burned in my memory, a silent promise of retaliation. Even so, beneath the fear was a quiet certainty. I had protected the patient. That was my oath, my duty. By the next morning, the news hit the local press. The article didn't mention my name, but everyone inside the hospital knew. Some colleagues offered me quiet support, a squeeze of the arm, a whispered "good job." Others avoided eye contact, as though afraid I might turn my gaze on them next. At home that night, I sat on the couch in the dark, the day replaying in fragments. The syringe, the patient's family, the shouting. I thought of how thin the line had been between catastrophe and survival. I whispered it aloud, as if to convince myself, "You did the right thing." Outside my window, the city lights flickered like distant heart monitors. The hospital would move on, the patients would keep coming, and Dr. Price's name would fade into scandal. But for me, the memory would remain, a reminder of the weight of vigilance, and of the cost of speaking up when silence would have been so much easier. And in that silence, I finally exhaled.